The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects by Edward Ruppelt. Recording by Roger Melin. Forward. This is a book about unidentified flying objects, UFOs, flying saucers. It is actually more than a book. It is a report, because it is the first time that anyone, either military or civilian, has brought together in one document all the facts about this fascinating subject. With the exception of the style, this report is written exactly the way I would have written it had I been officially asked to do so while I was chief of the Air Force's project for investigating UFO reports, Project Blue Book. In many instances I have left out the names of the people who were reported seeing UFOs, or the names of certain people who were associated with the project, just as I would have done in an official report. For the same reason, I have changed the locale in which some of the UFO sightings occurred. This is especially true in Chapter 15, the story of how some of our atomic scientists detected radiation whenever UFOs were reported near their UFO detection stations. This policy of not identifying the source, to borrow a term from military intelligence, is insisted on by the Air Force so that the people who have cooperated with them will not get any unwanted publicity. Names are considered to be classified information. But the greatest care has been taken to make sure that the omission of names and changes in locale has in no way altered the basic facts, because this report is based on the facts, all of the facts. Nothing of significance has been left out. It was only after considerable deliberation that I put this report together, because it had to be told accurately, with no holds barred. I finally decided to do it for two reasons. First, there is a worldwide interest in flying saucers. People want to know the facts, but more often than not these facts have been obscured by secrecy and confusion, a situation that has led to wild speculation on one end of the scale, and an almost dangerously blasé attitude on the other. It is only when all of the facts are laid out that a correct evaluation can be made. Second, after spending 2 years investigating and analyzing UFO reports, after talking to the people who have seen UFOs, industrialists, pilots, engineers, generals, and just the plain man on the street, and after discussing the subject with many very capable scientists, I felt that I was in a position to be able to put together the complete account of the Air Force's struggle with the flying saucer. The report has been difficult to write because it involves something that doesn't officially exist. It is well known that ever since the first flying saucer was reported in June of 1947, the Air Force has officially said that there is no proof that such a thing as an interplanetary spaceship exists. But what is not well known is that this conclusion is far from being unanimous among the military and their scientific advisors because of the one word, proof. So the UFO investigations continue. The hassle over the word proof boils down to one question. What constitutes proof? Does a UFO have to land at the river entrance to the Pentagon, near the Joint Chiefs of Staff offices? Or is it proof when a ground radar station detects a UFO, sends a jet to intercept it, the jet pilot sees it, and locks on with his radar, only to have the UFO streak away at a phenomenal speed? Is it proof when a jet pilot fires at a UFO and sticks to his story even under the threat of court-martial? Does this constitute proof? The at times hotly debated answer to this question may be the answer to the question, do the UFOs really exist? I'll give you the facts, all of the facts. You decide. July 1955. E. J. Ruppelt. Chapter 1. Project Blue Book and the UFO Story. In the summer of 1952, a United States Air Force F-86 jet interceptor shot at a flying saucer. This fact, like so many others that make up the full flying saucer story, has never before been told. I know the full story about flying saucers, and I know that it has never before been told because I organized and was chief of the Air Force's Project Blue Book, the special project set up to investigate and analyze unidentified flying object, or UFO, reports. UFO is the official term that I created to replace the words flying saucers. There is a fighter base in the United States which I used to visit frequently because during 1951, 1952, and 1953 it got more than its share of good UFO reports. The commanding officer of the fighter group, a full colonel and command pilot, believed that UFOs were real. The colonel believed in UFOs because he had a lot of faith in his pilots, and they had chased UFOs in their F-86s. He had seen UFOs on the scopes of his radar sets, and he knew radar. The colonel's intelligence officer, a captain, didn't exactly believe that UFOs were real, but he did think that they warranted careful investigation. The logic the intelligence officer used in investigating UFO reports, and in getting answers to many of them, made me wish many times that he worked for me on Project Blue Book. One day the intelligence officer called me at my base in Dayton, Ohio. He wanted to know if I was planning to make a trip his way soon. When I told him I expected to be in his area in about a week, he asked me to be sure to look him up. There was no special hurry, he added, but he had something very interesting to show me. When we got wind of a good story, Project Blue Book liked to start working on it at once, so I asked the intelligence officer to tell me what he had. But nothing doing. He didn't want to discuss it over the phone. He even vetoed the idea of putting it into a secret wire. Such extreme caution really stopped me, because anything can be coded and put in a wire. When I left Dayton about a week later, I decided to go straight to the fighter base, planning to arrive there in the mid-morning. But while I was changing airlines, my reservations got fouled up, and I was faced with waiting until evening to get to the base. I called the intelligence officer and told him about the mix-up. He told me to hang on right there and he would fly over and pick me up in a T-33 jet. As soon as we were in the air on the return trip, I called the intelligence officer on the interphone and asked him what was going on. What did he have? Why all the mystery? He tried to tell me, but the interphone wasn't working too well and I couldn't understand what he was saying. Finally, he told me to wait until we returned to his office and I could read the report myself. Report? If he had a UFO report, why hadn't he sent it in to Project Blue Book as he usually did? We landed at the fighter base, checked in our parachutes, Mae Wests, and helmets, and drove over to his office. There were several other people in the office, and they greeted me with the usual question, "What's new on the flying saucer front?" I talked with them for a while, but was getting impatient to find out what was on the intelligence officer's mind. I was just about to ask him about the mysterious report when he took me to one side and quietly asked me not to mention it until everybody had gone. Once we were alone, the intelligence officer shut the door, went over to his safe, and dug out a big, thick report. It was the standard Air Force reporting form that is used for all intelligence reports, including UFO reports. The intelligence officer told me that this was the only existing copy. He said that he had been told to destroy all copies, but had saved one for me to read. With great curiosity, I took the report and started to read. What had happened at this fighter base? About 10 o'clock in the morning, one day a few weeks before, a radar near the base had picked up an unidentified target. It was an odd target in that it came in very fast, about 700 miles per hour, and then slowed down to about 100 miles per hour. The radar showed that it was located northeast of the airfield, over a sparsely settled area. Unfortunately, the radar station didn't have any height-finding equipment. The operators knew the direction of the target and its distance from the station, but they didn't know its altitude. They reported the target, and 2 F-86s were scrambled. The radar picked up the F-86s soon after they were airborne and had begun to direct them into the target when the target started to fade on the radar scope. At the time, several of the operators thought that this fade was caused by the target's losing altitude rapidly and getting below the radar's beam. Some of the other operators thought that it was a high-flying target and that it was fading just because it was so high. In the debate which followed, the proponents of the high-flying theory won out, and the F-86s were told to go up to 40,000 feet. But before the aircraft could get to that altitude, the target had been completely lost on the radar scope. The F-86s continued to search the area at 40,000 feet, but could see nothing. After a few minutes, the aircraft ground controller called the F-86s and told one to come down to 20,000 feet, the other to 5,000 feet, and continue the search. The two jets made a quick letdown, with one pilot stopping at 20,000 feet and the other heading for the deck. The second pilot, who was going down to 5,000 feet, was just beginning to pull out when he noticed a flash below and ahead of him. He flattened out his dive a little and headed toward the spot where he had seen the light. As he closed on the spot, he suddenly noticed what he first thought was a weather balloon. A few seconds later, he realized that it couldn't be a balloon because it was staying ahead of him. Quite an achievement for a balloon, since he had built up a lot of speed in his dive, and now was flying almost straight and level at 3,000 feet and was traveling at the Mach. Again, the pilot pushed the nose of the F-86 down and started after the object. He closed fairly fast until he came to within an estimated 1,000 yards. Now he could get a good look at the object. Although it had looked like a balloon from above, a closer view showed that it was definitely round and flat, saucer-shaped. The pilot described it as being like a donut without a hole. As his rate of closure began to drop off, the pilot knew that the object was picking up speed. But he pulled in behind it and started to follow. Now he was right on the deck. About this time the pilot began to get a little worried. What should he do? He tried to call his buddy, who was flying above him somewhere in the area at 20,000 feet. He called 2 or 3 times, but could get no answer. Next he tried to call the ground controller, but he was too low for his radio to carry that far. Once more he tried his buddy at 20,000 feet, but again no luck. By now he had...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?